There is a specific kind of numerical data that Excel treats in a very particular way. This is all the data related with dates and time. For example, if I type in 12/12/2012, I want to express a date that Excel will save as a numerical data. In fact, we can appreciate that it has justified the characters to the right side of the cell, and it is going to treat it as numerical data because those are the operations I will normally want to carry out. With dates or with dates and times or with a combination of the two are normally arithmetic operations. For example, the difference between two dates will be the number of days that have passed between the previous and the later date. Therefore, for example, if I enter 12:25, Excel will understand that I want to express a specific time. A time that it is also being represented internally by Excel. In a way, it is stored as numerical data. That is why, once again, it gets adjusted to the right of the cell. And on top of that, we can also see that to those 12 hours and 25 minutes it has added. We see that it has added 0 seconds, although it does not show them, because I have not introduced the seconds in the first place. Alright, so, some of the data that Excel will understand as a date, well, it could also come in many other forms. For example, 7-7-2007. Excel will also understand this as data, and although I introduced it using dashes, it will represent it according to the way we have defined the spreadsheet by default for this specific data. In this case, we see that it is with double numbers, as we can see with the 0 and 7, and with the slash instead of the dashes that I had written in the first place. This will come in very handy to us, however, if we introduce the dates using the keyboard. It will not only understand the data, but also it will classify and express it homogeneously. It also happens, for example, if I enter 12/12. So this way I am not indicating the year, I'm indicating dates of a given year. Okay, in this case it might be that I have a different representation mode, which is precisely this one, which uses the abbreviation of the month with 3 letters instead of 2 numbers. What we could also do is introduce the following 12/13 and taking into account that there are not 13 months in the year. Excel thinks that we are entering the date in inverted format, also known as the English format. Clearly, and as it is very logical, if we input 14/14, there is no possible way that Excel understands this as any possible date. So it is going to think that what we really wanted to input was simply a regular text, 14/14. And so it understands it in this way, and therefore justifies it to the left side of the cell. That is why it is very easy for us to notice whenever Excel is properly understanding whatever we are typing. Therefore, verifying that what it has understood corresponds to what we wanted to enter is relatively easy. Maybe this kind of left-justified text has happened due to a typo, reading error, or any other reason. What is clear is that whenever it adjusts it to the left, it is clear that it hasn't interpreted the data as a date, or as a numerical value. Similarly, we have many ways of inputting the data. For example, July 7th. If we enter it in this way, Excel will represent it in the way we have predefined as default for the representation of dates with no years. Unlike if we had input 7-July-2007. Which in this case it translates into its default representation for dates that I enter, with the particular month and year. Perfect, let's continue. These are all modes that Excel has defined by default, which we can also edit and customize to our liking. All right, let's go a little bit further now. For example, we saw that 1/4, we have seen that it could be a fraction, but even though it could, specifically, if we don't tell Excel anything else, it will treat it as a numerical quantity, that it's referencing April's 1st. That is the way Excel understands it by default. The same applies to 1:1, which Excel understands as 1 hour and 1 minute. We could also even type 1 hour, 1 minute, and 1 second. However, it will never be able to understand the following combination, 1111. In this case, that will be understood as if we had written some extra text data. Okay, we see that in each cell we have written some data related to a date, or in other cells we have put information related to a specific time. These two types of seemingly different data types are the same kind of data. They are data and time, and since each data has an associated time, which if we do not enter it explicitly will be 0. And every hour also has a date, which will be the 0 that Excel starts to count, which is its default specific date. Well, we could also, in the same cell, we could combine the use of dates and times. For example, if we input 12/12/12 and 12:12 in this. In this case, it is going to understand that we are trying to specify a date at a particular time, and all this in the same cell. It is a moment in time. Therefore, it can be represented in the way that is defined by default, which is the one that we see here, with the days and months with 2 figures and the full years. We could also even say 12/12/12 at 1:25 space and p.m. Okay, it will know this, it will recognize that it is, that we are telling it that it was at 1:25 p.m. It understands the post-meridiem as being 13:25. But we must be careful, since if we wrote, for example, one that was very similar to the previous example. The thing is that if we do not add the blank space between the number and the p.m., for example, Excel will not recognize it. In order to input that extra information, we do need to add that blank space. So in this case, it will recognize it as if it was a simple text, basically some alphanumerical data. This is why we have to be a bit careful when we work with these, with dates and times. But what we have to remember fundamentally is that date and time data are numerical data, and this is why Excel, when it recognizes them as such, will adjust them to the right of the screen. Furthermore, Excel by default will represent them using a particular format, which we will be able to customize it later. On many occasions, our input method will not necessarily coincide with the method by default, but it will at least maintain the homogeneity within a collection of data. And finally, we have to be careful with the way in which we input the date and time data, since it is very easy to have some sort of typo. If I exceed the range in one of the numbers, in that case, Excel will not be able to understand it as a date and time, and so it will understand it literally as a text, as alphanumerical data. I hope you have found today's lesson useful. See you in the next one.